Well, alright then. I had a blast playing this again, as despite it being at least a decade since I last went through it, it didn't take long to get familiarized. The suit has evolved from the last game's lean, sleek design to a beefier, more imposing look, and it continues to be objectively the coolest thing. Like, go watch this trailer from 2011 and tell me it doesn't get you hyped. I know that some people were not happy with the changes made to how the suit works in this game. Anytime things are streamlined in games, there is almost always someone out there yelling that the devs dumbed things down, and I usually find that a very tiresome complaint. I will, however, cut the capital G gamers a little slack in that being able to manually increase your baseline movement speed was a much better option over just turning the speed setting into a sprint bar that drains suit energy. I can also appreciate people who preferred the more open gameplay of the first game, where you can pick and choose how you engage the enemy. It does play differently, the flow has become much more linear and action-oriented. This does not, however, mean you can't be stealthy in Crysis 2 or that it isn't fun. Quite the opposite, but as with almost all my videos, the gameplay isn't what we're here for. So let's get into it, shall we? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to stay up to date on all future uploads. We begin our journey with a news broadcast out of Manhattan, because this densely populated island is a very convenient location for riders to inflict containable chaos upon, and that isn't a criticism, that's a godsend. Riding is hard enough without having to think too much about logistics. There's been an outbreak of some extraterrestrial sickness that gives people a nasty case of not being alive anymore, after an extended period of slowly turning into a block of fleshy cheese someone left on the grill. This has caused a little bit of unrest, a little bit of rioting, and a lot of private military company brutality taking over the streets of Manhattan to enforce order. We cut to a submarine approaching the island and are introduced to Team Omega-1, Marines who have been tasked with extracting Dr. Nathan Gould. So much like the first game, we're being sent to rescue a nerd, and much like the first game, I'm sure this will go very smoothly, with no hitches, bumps, or horrifying symbiotic suits growing into our fatal wounds. So anyway, the only people who actually matter here are Chino, sitting next to us, and Alcatraz, the protagonist, and while he's the silent type, I appreciate the game offering not one but two explanations as to why he almost never talks. In the beginning, this is because he's massively hungover on tequila, the drink of masochists, and later on it's because of extensive lung damage. How does that happen? Well, just when the team is told to get ready, the sub is attacked and we're forced to flee through flooding corridors, swimming from a sinking metal tomb out into the open grave of the Hudson, where the Marines are massacred by a massive alien gunship emerging from the water beneath them. Everyone is shot to pieces, and that includes us. Floating in the water, slipping in and out of consciousness, we see a black-suited soldier fending off the airship with a massive gun. It's Prophet. He's still alive, and apparently we were meant to be supporting forces to help him help Gould. Cryptically reading off his name, Prophet tells Alcatraz it'll be up to him now. He drags the Marine away to an abandoned building, skins himself out of the nanosuit, puts the mostly dead soldier inside, asks Alcatraz to remember him, and promptly ventilates his brain case to sever his connection to the suit. Whatever happened to hi? Hello? How are you? He does this because he's sick with the Manhattan virus, a deadly alien spore proliferating throughout the island, and he's too messed up to continue his mission, so his only hope is that some poor half-dead Marine doing their best impression of meat stew in a thermos flask can drag his carcass around New York long enough for the suit to develop some kind of counteragent. It's just the fate of all humanity, son, no pressure or anything. Stumbling around like a fresh baby horse through dead victims of the virus and executed doctors alike, Alcatraz emerges into the daylight to find that even though there are aliens currently decimating New York, he is enemy number one for CEL, Crynet Enforcement and Local Logistics. This is the private military company enforcing order through Manhattan, and is controlled by Crynet, the company responsible for creating the nanosuits. The problem is that Prophet may have done a little fucky-wucky and gotten himself an express pass to the Forever Box courtesy of CEL, and it would have been really cash money of him to mention that since he just shoved Alcatraz inside his suit without mentioning he wasn't going to be around anymore to the people he's working with. And it's not like Alcatraz can tell them because he literally can't talk. Thanks, Prophet. Tasked with finding Gould, Alcatraz can either sneak his way through the area or fight the mercenaries trying to kill him. The choice of how to engage is still yours, despite what detractors might say. Are the levels less open? Yeah. Can you still decide how to proceed? Yes. Are you wrong for preferring the first game over this one? Not at all. I just wish you didn't pretend the second half of the first game didn't exist when talking about the direction the series went, because the alien shit has always been there. Gould gets in contact and gives us directions to his location, leading us on a lovely walk through the subway system so we can see all the infected folk slowly melting into miserable piles of wet, fleshy suffering. They're down here because Cell are starting to purge anyone who shows signs of infection, which is what left all those bodies back in the warehouse. They've given up on evacuation and are shooting on sight, which goes double for us because we're apparently an active biohazard, but Commander Lockhart, who is in charge of Cell, also lost a nephew to the nanosuit program, and Prophet took out a bunch of Cell members getting to this point, and that made them mad, so who's to say why they're really after us with this much venom? Unfortunately, the subways are a great place for flesh-sucking alien mosquitoes to make their nest, and I know the first game had just a tiny hint of body horror, but Crysis took that hint, planted it, and let it grow like uncontrolled garden mint because this wet sheet of bulging, weeping flesh sloughing out of this guy's shirt? This sucks! We're sidetracked from linking up with Gould by an alien ship crashing nearby, where he has us fight to get inside it and perform some science. Gould believes he can find a solution to our alien spore problem if we get our slightly dead hands on some alien tissue samples. The thing is, upon scanning the suspicious pink flesh oozing out of the very clearly alien ship, it comes back as human in origin. And shortly after, we're attacked by exosuit-wearing squid infantry with bodies that look suspiciously similar to that fleshy pink ooze the robot mosquitoes were gathering from humans, slowly melting thanks to the molecular breakdown caused by the Manhattan virus. One of the alien soldiers tries to give Alcatraz a cheeky wee injection, but the suit rejects it for lacking the right vibes. Thankfully, we're able to acquire some alien tissue after dispatching these new enemies, and the nanosuit absorbs it, unlocking the ability to gather nanocatalysts from dead aliens so we can upgrade the suit. This also triggers a failsafe laying dormant in the suit's deep layers that Gould is very eager to scan. I don't think any of this is healthy, but Alcatraz is pretty screwed either way, so give me that delicious sparkling catalyst so I can muffle my goddamn footsteps. Genuine question, how many people actually unlocked and used the air friction or ground stomp modules? I never found them worth it personally, but On the way to Gould's lab, we overhear a conversation between Commander Lockhart and Tara Strickland, the latter of which is the daughter of late Major Strickland, who perished in the first game, and she also works for Cell. Lockhart is aggressive and belligerent about killing Prophet, even though it would legitimately be better if they captured Prophet alive, because last time I checked, corpses can't really divulge a lot of information after you've just put around through their moist memory banks. He isn't here to be a complex character though, he's here to be the unreasonable military antagonist, and he fits that perfectly, which I'd focus more on if they didn't end the conversation in the funniest possible way, where Lockhart shrieks, "This conversation is over!" before they both have to sit next to each other on the helicopter and pretend they weren't just arguing. Anyway, Gould has to fall back from his lab to a nearby apartment for safety, which would be fine if the dweebus hadn't left the address on his computer, so we still swing through the lab to deal with that, before finally meeting up with him in person. He has an old suit cradle to scan us with, and it's here someone finally realizes we aren't Prophet, which unfortunately does result in Gould having to see someone he knows ventilate their own brain pan. Nonetheless, he bounces back from the shock fairly quick and devises a new plan to investigate what's going on in the suit's deep layers, since it seems to be awfully familiar with the alien chemistry, enough so that Gould figures it's creating a vaccine against the Ceph's viral spores. His suit cradle lacks the processing power to scan our deepest depths, so after dealing with a squad of Cell soldiers, we're sent scurrying to a command post on Wall Street, where we can find a nice, crisp, up-to-date cradle to see just what the hell is going on down there.
Hey man, ballistic trauma to heart and both lungs. Looks like the right ventricle took most of the damage there. Lungs ruptured at multiple locations, broken ribs at, well, take your pick, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Got a flailed chest segment right there, extensive pulmonary bruising. More ballistic trauma to the sternum, the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae. He's a corpse walking, Gould. Without the suit, look at that! It's like it's growing into the wounds.
The answer to which is, what if we turned a life support system into symbiotic military hardware that grows into someone's open wounds to keep them alive and eats up their less critical organs to do so? Which isn't really an answer so much as another question with horrifying results. Now, the other injuries listed are pretty straightforward. The heart and lungs were ruptured by gunfire, the ribs are broken, bruising on the lungs as if the ruptures weren't enough, shattered sternum and spinal cord damage, but you might be wondering, Khan, what's a flail chest segment? This is when the ribs have broken in such a way that they've become completely detached from the rest of the rib cage and are just kind of sitting there in the flesh waiting to be sliced out like a ready-made rack of ribs. All this means that our boy Alcatraz is alive only so long as the suit remains powered and functional, and the way this is used later in the game is kind of gut-wrenching, because this guy was just a normal Marine before this happened. He wasn't expecting to get shot to pieces on arrival, he didn't ask to be saved like this, and by the end of it all, it doesn't even do that much. But we'll get to that. The deep layer scan is interrupted by Commander Lockhart busting in, slamming Gould's head into a wall and almost putting a round into Alcatraz before Tara Strickland talks him down. Taken into cell custody, the suit is powered down, and Alcatraz is forced to get up and walk under his own strength with all the physical damage we just went over, and none of the support he gets from the suit. As soon as it's taken away, we hear him struggle to breathe, taking panicked, shallow wheezes, and when he walks, it's slow, unsteady, and his vision is blurring, colors are bleeding into each other, the edges are fading in and out of darkness. All the while, Lockhart snarls at his back, shoving and kicking the clearly unwell Alcatraz down the hole, as we listen to Strickland and Gould snipe at each other ahead of us. She's been calm the few times we've seen her so far, but a jab about how disappointed her late father would be to see her working for Cell gets a growled, "shut your fucking mouth" out of her. Now, we've been seeing severe seismic activity throughout the game, and quakes strong enough to unsettle buildings and collapse bridges, which is very unusual for New York and the US East Coast in general. And if you cast your mind back to the first game, you'll remember that the aliens were initially hidden inside a mountain before busting out of there and causing many tons of rock to tumble off like gravel. Boy, I wonder where the aliens are coming from this time. Just as the helicopter carrying Alcatraz lifts off, an alien spire bursts out from the ground and cancels the life subscription of everyone still nearby with a burst of glittering black spores. I hate it when that happens. This does allow the suit to get a nice close scan of the spore at least, and then the game gives you the prompt, activate defibrillator. As horrifying as these moments are, I love them for bringing you down to this level of mortal fragility. Alcatraz is actively dying. He should be dead. He's a walking corpse, only functional and upright because this hijacked alien tech suit is growing into his body through open wounds. For most of the game, you are a powerful, nigh unstoppable force to be reckoned with, and very little puts up enough challenge to risk ending this journey then and there. But these scenes where you are actively trying to get his heart pumping again, in spite of all the damage his body has suffered, brings you back down to earth. You are not invulnerable, nor unstoppable, and with a simple loss of power, Alcatraz is sent right back to the beginning of the game, breathless, limp, and watching the color fade from his world. Until his heart is kicked back to life and he can drag himself away from the danger. One of Prophet's memories surface and shows us flashes of the first game while Hargreave talks to him, telling him to report back on what he saw and bring back samples if he can. Hargreave knew the Ceph were there and sent Prophet's team in to recover data. We finally wake up to see some wet and nasty robot mosquito on melted corpse action, and find that Mr. John Nanosuit himself has made contact with Alcatraz. Hargreave directs us to City Hall, where people are being evacuated by the American military, remarking along the way that the Ceph are exemplary for their efficient and environmentally sound method of extermination. Unfortunately for us, the DoD is going to flood Lower Manhattan by blowing a dam, so we hurry on through an alien hive, over the shattered streets of New York, and under the ever-increasing shadow of exposed alien architecture until we reach another spore spire, where the Ceph airships are docking. Shoving our whole fist into 3 very spicy spore slots allows us to enter the main shaft itself, and it almost seems like the suit is going to interface properly with the alien glitter cloud, only for Alcatraz to get unceremoniously yeeted. With no more time for science experiments, Hargreave sends a helicopter to pick us up before the dam is blown, but we get there just in time to be washed down the street like an empty soda can. While Alcatraz is knocked out, the suit continues working on the spore data, and we eventually come to hearing the voice of Chino from the beginning, who somehow survived that mess without anywhere near as much damage. Fighting through an obscene amount of bullshit, we end up at the Hargreave Rash building to retrieve a stabilizing agent so the suit can finish developing its countermeasure against the Ceph. We blast our way into the garage, fight through more belligerently vindictive cell soldiers mad that you won't just lie down and die when they attack you, and make it to the security desk right in front of a very big glass wall that once upon a time must have let a lot of lovely sunlight into the building, but right now is barely holding back the seawater that just flooded in. Lockhart pops up to ruin our day with an ambush, and the force of the fighting causes that glass to finally buckle and flush us out of the building. Hargreave leaves to have a slap fight with Lockhart, and with no other options, we link up again with Chino and the rest of the Marines at Grand Central Station. Colonel Barclay is in charge of the Marine forces here, and while he's trying to evacuate the remaining uninfected civilians, this is somewhat hampered by the Ceph sending adorable little love taps in the form of heavy artillery. We help bring down a building to block the line of fire and make our way down to the trains to speak with the colonel, passing by all the civilians waiting for evacuation. The virus remains an ever-present threat as one man demands to be let in to see his wife, and is denied on the grounds that despite looking unmelted, she's in the early stages of infection and they can't risk it. We also see some cell soldiers being held prisoner, and we learn that at some point orders were handed down to disarm them on sight. One of them argues to be given a gun so he can help defend the station, and that he should be trusted because he used to be part of the US military. This doesn't work, however, and he's soundly rejected by the Marines standing nearby because working for a private military company is bad and how dare you, as if serving in the nation's military is really all that morally superior, but right at this specific moment in time we're evacuating innocent civilians, so ride that high horse while you can, buddy. Somehow, Gould escaped from Tara Strickland, which Barclay privately believes was done purposefully on Strickland's part because she used to be a Navy SEAL. He also just airs her personal business out to Alcatraz, explaining that she took her father's death badly enough to get a dishonorable discharge thanks to alcohol and drug abuse. Moving on from the character drama, we head topside to defend the station from waves of enemies, including an alien tripod called a pinger, which is my least favorite enemy in the game thanks to how much firepower is needed to bring it down. And I'm sure the comment section is about to be riddled with absolute fucking nerds who can't wait to tell me that they never had a problem with the walkers, just like they never had a problem with the helicopters in the first game. Congratulations, here's a sticker. Anyways, the trains finally depart and we race out there to avoid being crushed under a falling building. The driver briefly stops when the husband from before flags us down, trying to get his infected wife to safety. This scene sucks, but in a good way. Because the driver stopped. He didn't just keep going or run the guy over in a rush to escape. They are so close to being safe, but the wife's legs are pinned. The husband is desperately trying to get her free. The building is getting closer and closer to complete collapse. There's just not enough time, and we have to leave them behind to be crushed, along with anyone else who was unlucky enough to still be down there. Now, seeing as this game is set in New York City, it's pretty much legally obligated to have at least one level that takes place in a wrecked Times Square, and we do just that, fighting off waves of Ceph to make sure secondary evacuations for the Marine forces can take place. After fending off the squids, Hargreave finally gets into contact again at the same time another spore spear erupts from the ground. We enter the glittering cloud of human-dissolving nightmares, allowing the suit to finally complete its analysis, and turn the imminent spore blast against the Ceph, making them burst like swollen, fleshy water balloons. However, this does lead to another sequence where you need to actively force Alcatraz's heart to keep going, and you get to watch his arm flinch and convulse against the ground with each pulse, and dear lord, this man needs a rest. While the smaller Ceph died immediately, there was a walker that tanked the blast and is about to send Alcatraz to the big sleep, only for Barclay to swoop in, giving him the chance to fling himself into the VTOL. We're then promptly flung back out of the VTOL into the East River so we can link up with Hargreave at the Prism, a secure facility on Roosevelt Island. Now, the island is absolutely covered in cell soldiers, but at this point I've snorted so much alien glitter that it's hardly an issue. Lockhart plans to catch Alcatraz like a fly in a bug zapper, but because his sneaky EMP blast is hooked up to the nearby power station for juice, Hargreave helps us circumvent that trap with the highly advanced technique known as, "Have you tried turning it on and off again?" allowing us to slip past all the commander's bullheaded plans and finally throw him through a bulletproof window to his death. Rest in pieces, you hard-headed dingus. We finally head into the prism to meet with Hargreave, and he's the one who hits us with an EMP trap. Son of a bitch. We see Tara Strickland march in to check that Alcatraz is down before blacking out, whereupon the suit systems work frantically to get us out of this situation. This leads to something in the deep layers activating, and we see a digital recreation of Prophet's face, speaking to Alcatraz, yelling at him to wake up in the same voice the suit has been using this entire time, just computerized. In the first game, you could switch between a male and female suit voice, but in Crysis 2, that option was removed, and this is why. Prophet is still in there, or at least a copy of him is still in there, driving us forward with our mission against the Ceph. Alcatraz comes too, being wheeled into an operating theatre delightfully called a skinning lab, where a nanosuit can be removed. You may be wondering why they need a dedicated lab for this when Prophet could just shuck himself like a high-tech oyster. The main difference is that Prophet was wearing a special layer underneath the suit to keep it from physically bonding to him. Alcatraz was put in there without that layer, and with dozens of open wounds the suit is actively growing into. So this is going to suck. Hargreave plans to wear the suit himself so he can deal with the Ceph, because he's under the belief that he's the only competent person here, even though the practical option would be to just continue guiding this highly effective soldier with your knowledge and expertise from the safety of whatever bunker you occupy, sir. Between flashes of surgical agony, we get flashes of Prophet talking to Hargreave about the Ceph, in which he realizes that the old man knew exactly what he was sending Prophet's team into on Lingshan and used them like guinea pigs. He wanted to see what would happen, and 2 of Prophet's men died. He knew the suits were symbiotic and would render a normal life impossible. He refutes dead men walking in favor of post-human warriors, as if that overcomes the complete lack of empathy or morals in doing this without the informed consent of the people who would be subjected to it. The rage of this memory causes the suit to reject the procedure, and we briefly hear it talk like Prophet again. Just as the Cell soldiers are about to execute Alcatraz, Tara Strickland comes in with a steel chair to rescue us, revealing herself to be CIA and the one behind the order to support Prophet and Gould, the reason Alcatraz was even on that sub at the beginning. Getting us on our feet, she sends us after Hargreave to bring him in for questioning, as he has critical information on the Ceph. This turns out to not be so much difficult as impossible, because Hargreave is a really big fan of Mr. House from Fallout New Vegas and had himself pickled. The things we do for cosplay. At this point, he recognizes Alcatraz is the best shot he has at striking a blow against the Ceph, and unlocks a syringe of science juice he calls the Tunguska iteration. The Ceph are this setting's explanation for the Tunguska event, and Hargreave has been around since then, which is why he decided to put himself on ice, so he would be here long enough to figure out a solution to this impending invasion. Because it isn't just Lingshan or Tunguska. The Ceph have buried strongholds all over the planet, including under New York City. The owners are coming back to spring clean the old family residence, he says, and they don't much like what they found festering behind the fridge. The Ceph bust in and we make ourselves scarce while Hargreave sets the facility to self-destruct and gives out a final order to all Cell personnel, informing them that Lockhart is a wet pancake and they have to help the guy who killed him, or aliens will melt them into protein sludge. What a day they're having. Escaping the explosion, we link up with Gould and Strickland, and the suit finishes installing the Tunguska iteration, meaning we have everything we need to finish this. We head to Central Park, where the main spore regulator is, and on the way learn that the Pentagon are planning to drop a tactical nuke on Manhattan. Yes, because that went so well last time. Regardless, Barclay manages to scramble some air support, and we're going to need it, because Central Park is... how would a geologist put it? No longer attached to the ground, thanks to the gigantic Ceph structure underneath deciding it needs some fresh air. With only 20 minutes before the nuke is set to launch, we fight through the crumbling remains of the park and an obscene amount of bullshit, up to and including a squad of invisible stab-happy little shits, before Alcatraz is finally able to enter the regulator. Inside, the suit's surface degrades, burns, and peels, fighting to stay functional against the overwhelming force of the spores here. Alcatraz slowly works his way forward, activating the suit's armor again and again, only to have it eaten away each time until he's forced to his hands and knees. He keeps going, his hands bursting into flames and black smoke, crawling forward one agonizing step at a time until he finally enters the eye of the storm. It fades to black, and we're suddenly face to face with Prophet, who remarks he's surprised he's still here too, but the suit changes everything. He shows us the map of the world again, with points of red where the Ceph have left behind massive lithoships, and we hear the suit say, "Assimilation complete." The spore regulator explodes in a wave of glittering white, instantly wiping out all Ceph forces in Manhattan, both above ground and below, ending the invasion. Several days pass, and we see people beginning to reclaim the city, with military forces flying in to help, and Prophet narrates that winning today doesn't mean the war is over, and that he and Alcatraz don't get to die before it's done. Alcatraz wakes up in the remains of Central Park to the voice of Karl Ernst Rasch, the man who founded the nanosuit company with Hargreave all those years ago, asking for his name, and for the first time in the game, he speaks. "They call me Prophet." So, what the hickety heck just happened there? Exactly what it looks like. Prophet's personality took over and is now piloting Alcatraz's corpse inside the suit, which is growing into his meat like so many roots from a tree. Fucking horrifying, I love it. Now, the point of these videos is to look at the story as presented in a given game without having to rely on outside material like books or comics, and in certain cases that leaves me in a bind because important context or events are thrown into auxiliary media, i.e. why a hero in the first game is a villain in the second game is only explained in a comic rather than the main form of media players are going to engage with this series through. However, the novelization of this game, written by Peter Watt's Crysis Legion, goes into more detail about what happened, and I highly recommend it if you're a fan of these games. There isn't actually a lot that I would change about this game's story, because I was okay with it turning in this direction. I understand why people preferred Crysis when it was high-tech stealth action in the jungle, so they don't really care for the second half of the game, but I also don't think that Crysis would be nearly as distinct without the overwhelming cosmic horror of being invaded by aliens who are to us what we are to ants. I've seen people lament the direction the series took with Crysis 2, but again, in my opinion, this usually seems to come from people who only enjoyed the first Crysis until aliens got involved, and I'm sorry, but that's what Crysis is. We fucked around with hyper-advanced alien technology, and now we're finding out because the aliens who made it have us in their sights, oh fuck, oh no. The only other series that I think captured this specific flavor of cosmic horror was Mass Effect, at least before the curtain was unceremoniously ripped away at the end of 3, but let's ignore that for a moment. The Reapers are unknowable, colossal, sentient machines, and the very first time you speak to one in the series, all of your ability to charm, convince, or control a conversation just falls completely flat for once. This thing is immune to even the possibility of considering what you want as a living, breathing creature. It barely registers you as something worth taking note of, and it refuses to explain its motives. It's that feeling of coming up against something that is so far above us on the Kardashev scale that what we struggle to fight in Crysis 2 is essentially automated garden tools that suddenly had to adapt and learn how to fight because they found a really aggressive nest of termites. That's why they had humanoid units all of a sudden compared to the flying scout drones in the first game, why they were firing projectiles and had human-like tactics. These weren't military machines with soldiers in them. These were fucking lawnmowers with wetware CPUs, mirroring us because they didn't know how to fight otherwise. They weren't programmed for that. Like, imagine realizing that. You just barely survived an alien invasion. You pulled through by the skin of your teeth because one poor undead asshole in a supersuit flung himself into the bioweapon that was about to kill you all. And you find out that what nearly wiped you out was the alien equivalent of a Roomba. So I can't wait to see what happens to us in Crysis 3. With that, we are done with Crysis 2, and since I don't really have a lot to add or change about what happened in this game, there isn't going to be a storyboard video. We're going to cover another small game sent to me through Steam's Curator Connect instead. May is also just around the corner, and I intend to share some mildly spicy Star Wars thoughts, so look forward to that. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you have a game you'd like to inflict on me. Special shout out to my supporters on Patreon, who are all very handsome people. If you'd also like to be called a very handsome people, check out the link in the description. Patrons of all tiers get access to uncensored videos in the event YouTube really doesn't like the content of the game I'm covering, and patrons of the affectionate nerd tier get to see behind the scenes content and intros for upcoming videos. There's been a big jump in numbers recently, and I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching, remember to take your medication, drink your water, be kind to yourselves, and I will see you all next time.